Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to FEM America's Online Summit 2020. Proudly supported by our sponsors, International SOS and United Healthcare Global. Welcome to FEM America's Online Summit 2020.
Hello, and a very warm welcome back to FEM's 2020 America's Online Summit. This is day 2 of our special condensed digital version of our annual get-together. If you are unable to catch day 1 live, fear not, it will be available on demand on the FEM website. On day 1, we heard from our great panelists from BD, ADP and International SOS on the subject of technology and how the tools that have in some cases literally been our lifeline during the recent crisis can be used in the future to help us work not only smarter, but also to support our well-being too. We gained some valuable insight on working anywhere together in this new normal from experts at KPMG. And we learned how to optimize talent mobility strategy from Tanya Mariottini. Today, we have another brilliant masterclass, then an opportunity to tune into a great conversation between mobility leaders at 2 of America's most iconic brands, McDonald's and Coca-Cola. Then we finish with a lively panel discussion focusing on the positive steps that we can all take as we move forward to support continued mobility and business growth. We have leading figures from Becton Dickinson, Unilever, Foster's and Partners, and United Healthcare Global. Companies that are engaged in medical instrument manufacture, consumer goods, architecture and engineering, and medical and security risk management. We'll begin now with the second of our mobility masterclasses. And today, we are very fortunate to hear from Karen King, who's Senior Manager in Global Mobility at Kearney, formerly known as AT Kearney. In 2019, Kearney won a number of EMAs, that's FEM's Expatriate Management and Mobility Awards. And they won not just in the Americas, but in EMEA and APAC too. The judges were so impressed with their transformation that they won Best Redesign of a Global Mobility Strategy and Best ROI or Cost Effectiveness Strategy. This achievement was all the more remarkable, I think, because as you will hear, just over 6 years ago, there was no formal program or oversight of costs. So Karen has a really compelling story to tell, and the results show for all the hard work too.
Mobility Masterclass, maximizing the value of your mobility program with Karen King.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karen King, and I co-lead the mobility function along with our employment and mobility tax lead at Kearney. I'm speaking to you today from my home in the suburbs of Chicago. Although I would have much preferred to be with you in person in Dallas, I'm happy to have the opportunity to share a few thoughts with you today during this webinar. I do hope everybody is staying safe and well during these unprecedented times. Today's session is titled How to Maximize the Value of Your Global Mobility Program. We hope that by sharing Kearney's journey in building its mobility function over the past few years, you can take away some nuggets that will be of value to you in your programs. First, by way of some background, Kearney is a global management consulting firm with $1 billion in revenue, 3,600 employees in offices in 40 countries. We work with more than 3/4 of the Fortune Global 500, as well as with the most influential governmental and nonprofit organizations. From a mobility perspective, we have over 700 participants, the majority of which is client-facing project mobility. Project mobility is the DNA of our firm. On average, 72% of our consultants travel to more than 80 countries each year for work purposes. We also have a robust, self-initiated one-way transfer program, providing relocation support and a handful of strategic assignments, primarily on Local Plus packages. At Kearney, we are fortunate that leadership recognized the value of moving talent globally and that all stakeholders, the firm, the consultant, the client, benefit from an international experience. Our program has grown significantly from an ad hoc approach with no formal function to a strategic one, delivering competitive advantage to the firm. Yet just over 6 years ago, there was no formal structure to mobility at Kearney. Assignments consisted of individual negotiations. Employees navigated their own moves without much support. There was a lot of noise in the system with frequent escalations to leadership and no visibility to assignment costs. Service providers self-managed, and there was little or no central oversight of mobility in the regions. Mobility leadership was recruited, and today we have a team of 7, regionally dispersed, providing mobility and tax global oversight and governance. Today, we are proud to say that we are recognized as trusted advisors, providing thoughtful guidance and cost-effective solutions to key stakeholders. How did we get there? One of the first things we did was to understand the firm's business strategy and priorities. One of the firm's goals, to provide unsurpassed personal growth opportunities in a collaborative, diverse culture, aligned well to mobility. We then began to build the infrastructure and framework needed to ensure the mobility program could deliver on this goal. Leaders, past participants, and other key stakeholders were interviewed. A business case for formalizing the mobility function was approved. Internal resourcing was put in place. Policies were reviewed, benchmarked, updated. Global processes were established, including alignment with key stakeholders on who takes lead in each aspect of the processes. Global oversight and governance was established to ensure consistent application of our policies. Service provider relationships were reevaluated, changed, redefined, with proper oversight and SLAs put in place. We value our service provider relationships as extensions of our external team. Having strong global service provider partnerships is key to enabling better resolution of issues and a positive employee experience. With our framework established over the course of a couple of years, we also recognized that we needed to define what success looks like. Value can only be measured if you know what that looks like. Instead of trying to define success based on return on investment or ROI, a financial term which is difficult to measure in the mobility world, we chose to turn it around and ask ourselves, what is the return on mobility, or ROM? For us, that means identifying business priorities of the firm and providing solutions that align mobility to those priorities. I'll provide a couple of examples in a few minutes. At the same time, we knew we needed deeper insights into our program in order to bring issues forward and proactively prompt changes. This led to the creation of program dashboards in Tele, using information in HRS from our external providers and in various logs and other tracking spreadsheets. We aligned program metrics with overall firm metrics so that we could compare attrition and performance metrics to the broader firm statistics. What we learned has enabled us to have more meaningful conversations with participants, global HR teams, and leadership. For example, consultants will frequently ask us, will a transfer impact my career development at the firm? Before dashboard reporting, we couldn't answer that question factually. We now track mobility performance statistics and can confidently say that the vast majority of transfers remain on track or even improve post-transfer from a career development perspective. And we share that with consultants. We have evidence that a transfer positively influences a consultant's tenure with the firm. We know that last year, over 1,400 consultants from 39 home countries worked on client-facing projects in 84 host countries. Of this population, over 40% triggered some form of internal tax evaluation and preemptive tax planning. This is powerful information to have. We regularly communicate the value of the mobility program and the function to leadership in periodic updates during the year and always in a year-end presentation deck. This gives the opportunity to showcase the value by highlighting the solutions and program insights and how they're tied to the business. Our framework and direction for mobility with leadership approval is expected to continue to bring long-term value and commercial advantage to the firm. It's key to build a framework for the long term. Even if priorities change, having the right framework in place will allow you to tweak it as needed, not restart altogether. We developed a mobility vision and mission aligned to the firm's strategy. It drives our own team's strategic focus and annual goal planning. It is our value statement. Everything we do can be classified as either enhancing consultant experiences, achieving cost savings, mitigating risks, providing better program insights, or providing greater efficiencies through the use of technology. We also communicate how the firm's mobility programs align to the overall HR and talent strategies. For example, the firm's operating model relies heavily on the effective staffing and cross-border resourcing to fill skill gaps and leader roles. Getting the right people to the right place at the right time is critical. Our team plays a critical role in helping the firm achieve this goal by posting open opportunities on our mobility intranet site and matching those resources to those openings. Having all openings in one place helps consultants source opportunities quickly. Guiding key stakeholders through our advisory role is another way. We have a unique global view that helps make the right connections and decisions on employee selection for openings. Costing options and advising on the best mobility offering to fit the business need, taking into consideration immigration and tax implications, including preemptive tax planning, are all other ways. This ensures effective use of the firm's resources. With respect to attracting, retaining, and developing talent, we promote mobility throughout the recruitment process, beginning with our external website. Feedback received from campus recruitment indicates that our mobility program is one of the reasons graduates choose our firm. We provide options to ensure we have the right balance of offerings to support attracting, retaining, and developing talent. Transfer requests globally are highly sought out. We've designed a low-cost, high-service relocation assistance transfer program accommodating personal requests to move. A high percentage of transfer requests, over 80%, are approved annually with minimal cost to the unit. Accommodating personal requests has reduced employee turnover and improves retention, and we measure this. We constantly review our offerings to ensure they meet employee and business needs. For example, in response to requests from employees, we recently introduced a program to assist any employee not moving for the firm, but perhaps down the street, by connecting them with moving and lifestyle services to support them during this type of non-company involved move. This new program addresses a need and provides a solution that mobility can offer. Another business priority is client stewardship, creating maximum and lasting impact in the marketplace and with our teams by striving to be the number one choice for the clients we serve. We have evidence that both project and internal global employee mobility enhances global collaboration in many ways and provides units with commercial advantage. It also provides employee developmental options and facilitates unit access to Kearney's global experts. It provides a pipeline of employees better matched to clients seeking consultants with global mindsets. Mobility improves the bottom line. Our cost effectiveness strategies have resulted in improvements in cost management, which is always a business imperative. Some of the ways we've managed cost include changing from a fully outsourced model where vendors managed us to a hybrid solution with regionally based in-house advisory and central management of external service relationships. Recruiting employment tax expertise in-house was critical for us, changing tax providers and streamlining the tax process. Monitoring employees on project assignments to stay below tax thresholds. An internally created system now tracks employee location days and notifies the team when a predetermined threshold is reached. This allows for preemptive country tax planning and has saved the firm millions in tax and compliance fees. Providing cost estimates and tracking against actual cost is another way, as well as delivering relocation and assignment assistance based on employee needs assessments. Doing so achieves a lower per person cost, plus employees feel their needs are personally met. Several of these cost effectiveness strategies will be recurring cost reduction benefits each year. It is expected that the tax effectiveness initiatives alone bring savings in excess of $2 million every year. Cost effectiveness strategies can give long-term benefits. Be sure to quantify the savings achieved each year in your programs. Of course, the cost of assignments can sometimes be a deterrent to all of our mobility options. Upfront assignment planning, employee needs assessment, and tax planning optimization helps alleviate the cost barrier. Let's talk a little bit about innovation and enhancing the customer experience. It's important to monitor industry trends to spark ideas that might drive program improvements. Keep a pulse on your population, what works and what doesn't, and seek feedback from key stakeholders on what's needed. Regional focus groups with past program participants led to the creation of an advocate program, a mobility community of past, present, and future advocates who provide a network of support to each other, starting from thinking about a move through the settling in process. Consultants appreciate the service the firm provides them, but they also value the personal connection with a colleague who has already navigated a move and who can help guide them through the myriad of details and decisions facing them. They often develop lifelong connections. Connecting consultants with peers enhances the mobility experience and creates promoters of mobility across the firm, as we like to say. We're using technology for a better employee experience. We recognize the need for a self-service tool, particularly for the younger demographic who want to quickly assess the new location in advance of more traditional means of doing so. We have partnered with an external service provider to create a customized employee platform for transfers to provide rental market education and support, customized tasks and reminders, and access to social insights from Kearney colleagues, and bespoke tools to help settle into the new location. Positive feedback is proving that this is a good way to enhance the mobility experience for transfers. Keep in mind that it's important to socialize new ideas, have champions, get leadership support, and alignment in advance of a business case for an initiative. Effective communication and change management strategies are necessary elements for effective results. We learned that when an initiative didn't include these elements, implementation was either derailed or the initiative was not a success. It's also important to have the right team in place for effective program delivery. Key characteristics of our mobility team are that we have become trusted advisors and have a global mindset. We have a unique global view of the firm, which positions us to manage expectations, prompt change, and collaborate across functions. Consultants, HR, and other key stakeholders routinely seek us out for advice and counsel on mobility matters. We focus on delighting our customers, primarily consultants, by delivering a high level of service focused on the individual needs within a budget. While we deliver assistance through services, not cash, we have a flexibility within a framework approach to address individual needs. This has resulted in satisfied consultants, easier and quicker integration into new offices, managed cost, and positive survey results. We're agile, flexible, and sensitive to different needs. We balance flexibility and empathy with fairness, consistency, and cost consciousness. We collaborate amongst each other regularly to discuss what's going on in each of our regions. Regularly communicating, sharing perspectives, and learning from each other helps foster our own global mindset and creative juices, while at the same time ensuring consistent application of policies. We proactively request and welcome feedback. It's a gift, and willingly adapt and evolve with the changing needs and strategy of the firm. As we look to the way forward in the future, we pay attention to the challenges for global mobility that come from both external and internal factors. We need to solution for disruptors like global immigration, protectionism policies, and an increase in global enforcement that reduce our ability to hire the best qualified resource and create lengthy delays in our ability to staff. This is certainly a challenge and one that we are continually discussing. Global tax compliance, real-time tax reporting, and increased scrutiny is such that close enough is no longer good enough. Better analytics lead to more targeted audits. Increased cooperation between tax authorities heightens risk of noncompliance. And so clearly this is a focus area for us. Different characteristics and needs of various demographic groups may impact ability to attract and retain without focusing on diversity and inclusion, policy flexibility, and smart mobility technology. Digitization, robotics, AI, easy access to data is driving fundamental changes to program management and processes. Internal focus on costs and need for flexibilities drives a change in perspective from a more policy-focused one to a more solutions-focused one, and flexibility within a framework. And then there's the pandemic. How will the future of the workplace impact mobility? It is recognized that many elements of the current environment, virtual work, leveraging digital tools for collaboration and connection, higher global standards for health and hygiene protocols, and a greater degree of connectedness and caring will carry forward into the future and reshape the way we work in our workplace. As a result, it is likely our operating model will change. We have seen success with virtual ways of working these past few months. While there is still a need for face-to-face, the frequency of face-to-face interactions with teams and clients will likely change. We might see less business travel. Working virtually, if location is other than your employment country, could also lead to some compliance issues if you don't know the location of employees. Things like employment tax could be triggered. Another country's employment rights could be assumed. Employer social security risks could be increased. This may lead employers to require tracking employee locations to an even greater extent. In the past, this has been a highly contentious privacy issue. We could see more and more need for employers to track employee locations using GPS-type technology. From a relocation perspective, we are likely to see more virtual surveys, virtual house hunt trips, and other virtual types of relocation activity. The industry might continue to see a further reduction in traditional assignments. Leaders for strategic positions may not need to be based in another country if business travel combined with virtual work can be just as impactful. Are virtual assignments a possibility? There may be lesser impact on self-initiated transfers, as these are typically for personal reasons and will need to remain. The good thing about mobility is it's never dull, is it? There are always new challenges and opportunities. Find a way to convert the challenge into an opportunity to enhance the value to your business somehow. Use every challenge to your advantage as a function. This is what we try to do. To summarize, here are some key considerations to maximize the value of your program. 1, ensure you understand your firm's business goals and align your mobility program to the strategic needs of the business. 2, establish a solid framework with consideration given to policies, processes, internal resourcing, external service partnerships, technology, dashboard metrics. 3, establish a mobility mission vision statement to drive your team's strategic focus. 4, align your mobility program with the overall HR and talent strategies within your firm. 5, identify business priorities and find mobility solutions that show your program and functions value. Ensure and show that you are effectively managing costs and mitigating risks. 6, find ways to innovate and enhance the employee experience. 7, prepare for the future. Recognize external and internal mobility challenges and solution for them to the best extent possible. 7, challenge the status quo. Continually reevaluate your program, identify big trends, and always seek to improve. 8, promote your program and communicate it, particularly through year-end leadership reports and periodic program update meetings. Lastly, and most importantly, is having a mobility team passionate about what they do, having fun in the process, and supporting each other in achieving stated goals. Thank you, Kearney team, for all you do. And thank each of you for your time today. I do hope you were able to take away a few nuggets that will help increase the value of your own mobility programs. Stay safe, be well, and thanks again.
Thanks so much, Karen. Again, a really practical guide, taking us right through all the essential points. Time for a short break now, but I hope we'll see you again for our new initiative. Tune in to hear Brian Medine and Christopher Chalk from McDonald's and Coca-Cola as they take some time out from the everyday for some global mobility thinking aloud.
Time now for a 5-minute refreshment break. When we return, we'll be thinking aloud with Brian Medine from McDonald's Corporation and Christopher Chalk from the Coca-Cola Company. Our thanks again to our silver sponsors, International SOS and United Healthcare Global.
Welcome back. I'm glad you could join us for this next conversation.
Thinking Aloud, presented by Brian Medine and Christopher Chalk.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome to a new type of session for us at the summit this year. We've called this Thinking Aloud, and it's really a chance for some global mobility leaders to kind of take a step away from the everyday, just to think a little more long term, hypothesize, strategize, just throw some ideas around and see how they come out in the wash. Today we have two iconic brands. I mean, you can't get much more American than Coca-Cola and McDonald's. And we have two mobility leaders from both of those companies with us. Brian Medine, who is a director of Global Total Rewards at McDonald's Corporation, and Christopher Chalk, who is Global Mobility Manager at the Coca-Cola Company. So I'm going to hand over to these two guys now, and perhaps you can just tell everyone a little bit about your companies and your assignees, and you know, basically what you do at these two corporations. Thanks.
I'll go first, Chris. Thanks, Claire. Yeah, Brian Medine, McDonald's Corporation, Director of Global Total Rewards. McDonald's, I'm sure you know what we do. It's actually quite a small program from a mobility perspective. Roughly about 40-45 assignees, long-term assignees. We have a number of short-term assignees, increasing number of international relocations. That largely summarizes the program. So I have oversight of global mobility, those international moves, domestic relocation in the US, and I also have responsibility for our long-term incentive plans as well.
Wonderful. So I've been with Coca-Cola Company just at 8 months now. I've been in global mobility quite a bit longer than that. Program at Coca-Cola is fairly centralized, and it's a hybrid of in-house and outsourced. We handle upwards of 400 long-term assignments that are active at any given time. In addition to that, of course, have short-term, commuter, permanent transfers, and then the domestic program also rolls up into my team. Claire, thank you for the opportunity to get together with Brian and to share our thoughts for as much as they're worth. The opportunity to have a conversation with Brian is something I always look forward to. Anytime we're theorizing on anything global mobility, I walk away with information that I didn't have. So I made Brian direct a couple of questions towards you, and just hope that we can have a little conversation about what's it going to look like next year, 2 years, 3 years, that kind of thing. What's keeping you awake at night right now, Brian?
Oh, there's a lot keeping me awake right now, Chris. Not too much with global mobility, in fairness. You know, I mean, listen, everyone knows what everyone's going through around the world for the last couple of months. And I think the question is how that's going to affect programs going forward. You know, what do we see happening programs going forward? It's wait and see. You know, for the last 2.5 months, we've just been rushing around trying to deal with issues as they've arisen. There's obviously a big question about when we're just going back to the office. You know, when are we opening up restaurants? When are we going back to the office? We do have moves in the pipeline. So the current indications are that we will continue to see mobility. The question is, you know, will there be a rethink? Will leadership kind of direct a rethink? Because we've been coping now for 10, 11 weeks, doing things remotely, people not getting on airplanes. We've all been told not to get on airplanes, not to travel. And, you know, things are still running. So I'm not so sure that I have a clear vision of what will happen. Obviously, we can talk about what might happen. Will we see more remote assignments? Will we see more people working from their current location? We already have a global structure that we have in place. So, you know, obviously not any country in the world, but we have a number of entities around the world to support our global structure. So we have global roles filled by people in other countries, and we'll see how much more that will be leveraged going forward, given the kind of restrictions that we've seen on travel and what we've learned over the last 10, 11 weeks. What about yourself, Chris?
I tell you, you really, literally couldn't pay me to get on a plane right now, unfortunately. And nobody from the travel department or travel industry are watching this, but the plain truth is, things like commuter assignments. Um, I don't. I see a big disruption to commuter assignments. Who wants to travel back and forth? Also, with the potential to have to quarantine for 14 days, even if it's self-imposed after you get there. So I think we'll see a big disruption to that, and then also to business travel in general. Um, you mentioned, how effectively we all are working remotely, and it's the same thing at Coke. We're surprising ourselves with how well it's going to the point that, I think short-term assignments will be different in the future. You may get on a plane for the kickoff meeting or for the wrap-up or both of those things, and maybe short-term assignments, which, from a corporate tax standpoint, once they've been approved there, but you may see short-term assignments happening remotely.
Yeah.
And I think we'll see a lot more of that project work.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine people will be a bit apprehensive about travel for the next period of time, right? I mean, we've seen how quickly these travel restrictions can be put in place and how kind of ill thought out they are. We've had a few, now, we're not a huge program, but we have had a few incidences of people essentially getting stuck in another country, or being separated from their family and trying to figure out how to get back. So we've had people on assignment whose family returned to the States, and then restrictions were put in place and they couldn't get back to the assignment country. We had to kind of navigate that. We've had another individual who was not an assignee, not on program, but a foreign national employed in the US who had gone back home and essentially is still there. It's been there for the last few months and kind of stuck in place there. There's a lot of uncertainty around the tax implications of that. We know what the OECD model says, but the OECD is basically saying you shouldn't really count those days, but it's down to each country to kind of take that interpretation and decide whether or not they're going to implement it. So my guess is that going forward, people might have a little bit of caution around travel generally. One, obviously the spread of any kind of virus and being on a plane, distancing from other people on the plane, face masks, taking all those precautions, but also then the idea of being caught out, right? The idea of getting to a jurisdiction, getting to another country, and finding out suddenly that you really need to get on the next flight, or you could be stuck. That said, ultimately, I think what we learn through a lot of things in history is that people do have short memories. So I think the risk is we'll get there, whether it be by the end of this year, next year, the year after that. I think people will be a lot more casual about travel. The people that don't mind those risks will have taken advantage of all the cheap flights they can, and then the industry, no doubt, will pick up again. Yeah. And then what we're doing, or what I'm doing proactively, is kind of putting in a pandemic addendum or a crisis addendum to our policies, so that essentially everything we've learned from this experience is documented, and we're ready to deploy that again in the future if and when this comes up again.
Fingers crossed. I think that's a great strategy, though, and a great approach. And in the world we live in, everything can change in a minute. I know a lot of companies, and we've talked about duty of care and disaster preparedness when we look at, what happened in Japan and in other places. But nobody that I know from a global mobility standpoint prepared for this. You meant, and hopefully we won't have to again. You mentioned some of the employees getting stuck and families getting stuck, and we've had some of those same things with having to get humanitarian flights out of places to get our people on those flights. So yeah, having that plan together. I think everybody had some sort of a plan, but not one to go for this long. Just being out of the office, nobody is expected to be out of the office as long as we've been. We grabbed, a few key things, but we're looking at for the Atlanta campus being out of the office, and it's no secret. It's been public for some time now, until sometime next year.
Hey, Chris, what did you find with your current assignees in terms of? Did you ask people to come home? Did you offer people the opportunity to come home? Did they take you up on that? Because you have obviously a much larger program than we have. So I guess you might have seen maybe a lot of different scenarios.
The one thing, that's not surprising about Coca-Cola is we really do take care of our people. And so we've got some people right now who are getting close to the end of their assignment or just weren't comfortable in going back. So in every case, we've been able to make arrangements and create that flexibility. So for people who wanted to leave, they were able to, and we were facilitating that. It wasn't just, well, if you feel like it, you can go. No, we were facilitating that. Just first and foremost was about safety, and it still is. Making sure people were safe and that they felt safe and that there's no pressure on them. Well, you need to stick it out. You'll be over in a couple of months, or it's not that bad where you are. There was none of that. We very much, first and foremost, wanted everybody to and their families to feel safe.
Right. I got asked the question, a couple of times, should we just essentially make a decision, one way or the other, no travel from this point on? And my reaction to that, which I talked to with my boss, was like, I think that's it. This is a global issue, but it's not affecting every part of the globe in the same way at the same time. So I think that's, not a good approach. I think we need a kind of more lasered approach with this. So our communication to our people was, look, we're here to support you. We understand the challenges of being overseas, particularly at times like this when you're concerned about family members at home. Whatever you want to do, we're going to support you. And we kind of set up our protocol or our steps of action we would take if somebody expressed a desire to come home. And it's essentially, just making sure we're checking in with the local government guidelines, with the CDC, with the WHO, checking with our security team and getting any input they have, because they were heavily involved in this process, and then making sure the individual just discusses that with their manager and that they understand what arrangements can be made for them to get back and how to continue their work from a different location. But we actually didn't have a lot of people choosing to come back. The way they saw it was, look, I mean, it's at this point here, I'm either sitting at home in the assignment location or I'm sitting at home. Some people were concerned about the family members, but they mentioned that, I've got siblings there, I have a brother or sister. So, but we didn't see a lot of people take us up on that. But we are obviously ready and willing to facilitate that travel. So I thought that was interesting. I thought maybe some people might have taken the opportunity to come home.
Yeah, the dogs agree with you. So they also are not to trivialize the issue, but this is our new normal. Zoom meetings with kids running through. It's been quite nice. My daughter will bring me little snacks throughout the day. The balance of that is the barking dogs. Yeah, I think it's part of that duty of care. And then the other side of that, Brian, that something that we've been looking at is, okay, if somebody was supposed to start, we had 50 people that were supposed to start new assignments April 2nd or April 6th, and all the travel bans came out mid-March. So what do you do with those people? In some cases, they've relinquished a spot in an international school. They've leased out their apartment or terminated their lease. Maybe the significant other has resigned a position. So much, and some of our assignments are, there's sort of a circuit where these two people go over here and then this woman comes. They're all interrelated. You can't just necessarily stop these things. And so then what happens for somebody who's supposed to start in July? Well, you're going to Italy. Things are looking better there. You're coming from this other country where it's not any worse. We can't tell them, yeah, you should go or you shouldn't go, because again, it's not just one person. This is impacting their families in some cases and other roles. So it's incredibly complex. And we've spent, we put together very detailed, essentially decision trees on what do we need to take into consideration for when these assignments are going to get forward. But first and foremost, it's the safety of the individual. So we're not going to tell somebody, yeah, you need to go. You've got lockdown in your home country, lockdown in the host country. So same. We would never do that to someone. It's one thing to have to go through this in somewhere you've lived your whole life, but to imagine going to a country you're not familiar with and trying to get food deliveries or just to navigate any of this. That's a big issue. And even out to people that are supposed to start in September or October, we don't know what the world's going to be like. So in some cases, does it make sense just to say, you know what, we're going to put the brakes on this and we'll start it in January when we have a better idea of what life's going to be like for you. So looking at that human element of it has been very, very important.
Yeah, it has. I mean, I think a lot of it is a lot of answers I've been given is like wait and see. We don't know. We had people, we were on this quite early in January, obviously with people in Asia, and thankfully some of them decided to sit it out there and not come back because it ended up they were just been kind of following the virus. And it would have been, going through the worst of it in Asia and then coming back to go through the worst of it in Europe. But it's also given us some business decisions to make. You touched on a couple of things there. We have a move that was planned for the summer. We have to try and secure a place for the kids in the school in the new assignment location. This is a subsequent assignment situation. So we had to secure the position for the kids in the school or the seat for the kids in the school there. But we also had a contingency plan if they're not able to go. The kids still need an education, so we have to, continue them in the school in the current host location. So we got some answers. Thankfully, the new host location, that school was very agreeable and flexible and kind of said, look, you pay the fees. If the move is delayed, we'll defer the fees until the following term. If the move's cancelled, we'll refund the fees in full. The school in the current assignment location just kind of said, look, it's at our discretion and we're not making any decisions now. So we had to, kind of acknowledge the fact that we might have duplicate expenses for schooling if that was the case. Well, also with people moving, are having some things to deal with around, checking out of the assignment accommodation, right? We've got some of our families overseas that are quite concerned about having people coming in and out of the house. Perfectly understandable. We see how this has hit the real estate industry generally in terms of viewing homes. See a lot more online tours of properties and things like that. But yeah, just that handover going through the standard process of checking out of the house when the landlord may have his representatives there, going through the rooms, checking everything. People are in packing up the house. You got a lot of people walking in and out of the house and arranging that for our family's comfort. Right? It's for me personally, no kids and all the rest of it, no older relatives hanging around, come on into my house. But I have to appreciate there are people with families and people with elderly relatives, and they're going to have a very different perspective on it. So we've been kind of navigating that as well and providing what additional support we can in those situations.
That's really interesting. And I've seen some of the same things where I can't take my comfort level and impose it on somebody else. Well, the Packers would be wearing masks and gloves and all PPE gear, and just because I would be comfortable with that, I can't, impose that on anyone. So we've had to have a lot of flexibility. And you mentioned sort of a pandemic addendum. So what does that entail for your company?
Question. What does it entail? It's a work in progress, Chris.
Yeah.
I've just been making notes of kind of everything that we've faced, all the issues that have come up, a lot of things we've already discussed, and what our kind of planned approach was, who we've consulted with. Because again, I'm getting questions about mobility. Should we just say no more mobility? And I mean, I oversee mobility, but I kind of feel that decision would be a little bit above my pay grade. But here's my perspective on it. So thinking about the other people that we need to partner with, other leaders of the business around the world that we need to partner with, and just kind of laying that out, in terms of what if this, then what next? Still a work in progress. Haven't got it done yet, but I think it's somebody. I can't even remember who recommended it, but I picked up on it and just literally started working on it straight away because it's the sort of thing that you don't think about it, you don't do it, and then you have turnover, people move on, or your memory fades, and you're kind of recreating the wheel. And next time it comes around.
Yes, I agree. I think one of the takeaways for me is this begins and ends with corporate tax to some extent. We had not able to say, and I don't mean it cruelly or anything, but because this impacted the entire globe from a corporate tax standpoint, in which you were talking about before, um, all the countries kind of in this together. So we weren't, but establishment takes on a different meaning at that point. So I'm not speaking for Coca-Cola or corporate tax or giving tax advice. That's something I will never ever do. But that made it a little bit different, and so also a lot more complicated.
Hey, hey, Chris, what about your vendors? How have they been impacted, or what have you seen there?
So our vendors, and I gotta say, all the vendors in this industry have been amazing. And I put something on LinkedIn the other day and really truly meant it. The insight and the information that I've gotten uh, through webinars and through emails have been invaluable. And our vendors, the vendors for Coca-Cola, have been just amazing. I mean, they've been on calls all day, every day with us, especially at the beginning. Late night calls, early morning calls. It's not even late night or early morning anymore because it's global. So it is. You just, wake up, sit down, go to work. The knowledge and experience that they collectively possess was really apparent over the last couple of months. And we really couldn't have gotten through this. We rely very heavily on them. And just the people in global mobility in general have been fantastic to work with. What about you?
What's your dog's name?
There's 3, and I would yell at them right now. The problem is one of them is deaf. I've even got a dog whistle on my desk for this. But again, got one that lost her hearing. So, I'll sort that out there. So,
Yeah, no worries.
Lucy, Murray, and Cooper.
I'm just waiting. I'm just waiting for my 2 dogs to start. Yeah.
Hold
So
on. I got to tell you a funny story.
Go
So
ahead.
I was having a call with one of our corporate tax people, and my dogs got cranked up because Amazon was delivering, and he got a funny look on his face. I guess his cat was sitting in his lap when my dog started going ballistic. So, yeah.
All right, our vendors, I mean, obviously it's a source of support. Trying to work out when you can move. You get a lot of questions from assignees, you get a lot of questions from senior level assignees. Already they are totally distracted and stressed about the state of the business and how they're kind of keeping all that going. Relocation is one of the most stressful things to do at the best of times, never mind during a global pandemic. They're asking questions for which, quite frankly, there really aren't necessarily any answers or any good answers. But I think the empathy being shown from our vendors has been great. Working out how and when we can get movers in to get people relocated, kind of mapping that out for them, helping them manage their expectations. I've also been talking to them just generally about how they're concerned about their business, the state of their business, and what they think is going to happen going forward as well. I think it's a lot of wait and see. There's still a fair amount of uncertainty even now as the economy seems to be opening back up. So, I mean, it's going to be an interesting space to follow this and kind of see what happens going forward and how quickly, if at all, we kind of bounce back to normal, or if we really do sit down and have a real good think about, what makes sense. I'm interested also to see if we're given that directive, who we need to work with on it. Because as you point out, you have got corporate tax issues, right? You have got potential PE issues when you have people working for one entity in a different tax jurisdiction. And who else needs to be involved in that? I think, quite honestly, I feel that that's something that will come from the very top if they decide that's the direction, and then we'll basically be tasked with figuring it out.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And talent is going to be such a key part of this. I had a conversation years and years ago with a colleague in global mobility, and I was talking about return on investment. What's our talent strategy? And he just looked at me and said, "Well, if we put somebody on an assignment, obviously they needed to go on assignment, so we don't really need to review the numbers or anything else. We wouldn't send anybody that didn't need to go." And I kept the laughter inside for as long as I could. But I think we've all seen examples of expats who probably didn't belong on the assignment that they were on for one reason or another. And so one of the things, I hate to bring up the 3 letters that people in global mobility either love or rail against, the ROI. But if we weren't having that conversation before, we are absolutely going to be having it going forward. Uh, when you look at the amount of money spent on mobility and look at the impact we've just had from COVID-19, you can't not have the conversation. Mobility is expensive. We know that, and I don't think we're going to figure out some magical way to quantify somebody's activities and efforts, but we're going to have to get a little bit closer than we've been.
I don't know if Claire will recall from previous sessions, but ROI and business travelers are two things I like to try and avoid. At least historically, I have been. I think ROI. I'll still work on that one, but I think with business travelers, you might see a flurry of global mobility people rushing to all of a sudden want to take responsibility for business travelers because that might be a source of future security. But again, if there's any travel at all, so we could very well see a redefinition of the mobility function, the mobility, as a program.
And let's talk about that a little bit. So, what do you think it's going to look like internally, and then maybe the model as a whole? What potential changes do you see?
Honestly, Chris, who has a crystal ball, right? But I guess my thought on things generally is people have short memories, right? And things work in cycles. And my guess is in a couple of years, if there's not another kind of major pandemic, or if this kind of tidies up by the end of the year, and who's to say if it does or doesn't, we'll get back to normal, I think, within a year or two. I do believe that. I obviously can't prove that, time will tell.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't, then we're going to be tasked with how do we arrange this, and then we're going to have to partner quite heavily with tax and legal. It's not just we're saying this kind of thinking about this in terms of how things stand right now. Now, taxes are generally slow to change, but do you get to a point where you're questioning, are the tax rules kind of outdated? Do they make sense anymore? Are you going to see a kind of collective change towards how governments view the PE thing, for instance? It's a source of revenue for them, so why would they? But a lot of what we design is subject to circumstances, right? At the end of the day, we can be as proactive as we can be, but ultimately we work within a kind of fixed environment in that sense. So right now we're working within the current environment. Going forward, say what do we think will happen? I think it's like, how are you going to predict it? How are you going to predict it? My view is I think we'll get back to normal. I don't personally think that this is going to completely redefine mobility. I think people might be a little bit more cautious in the medium term, but I think it'll go back to normal. And hey, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Then we adjust and we kind of plan accordingly, and we design programs around that, and that becomes our new jobs, our new norm. What are your thoughts?
So again, I find myself wishing for that crystal ball, and it's something, going back to the conversation about the vendors. We've asked them to get theirs out repeatedly and tell us when this is going to end and what it's going to mean at a time when they're struggling and they're suffering too. So I think we're going to have to be flexible, and I think we're going to have to be creative. Your point about business travel, if mobility programs didn't already own it or weren't already looking at it, you're probably looking at it now. And also wonder, something that I see the potential for, if you've got a person who's supposed to cross the border for a long-term, short-term, whatever, and you've got a company telling them, well, corporate tax weighed in on it, and you're good for another 2 months in your current location. How do you make sure that next year, when things are normal, or 2 years from now, that same group doesn't go, you know what, we'll have him work on that project, but he can do it from here like last time. I worry, not Coca-Cola, but I worry that companies in general could lose a little bit of control of that, and that's always existed in lots of that's not anything new. The stealth expats, that's been a term forever. And in any organization, it doesn't have to be yours or mine. You see every once in a while, global mobility will trip over one of the, where they ask you to renew a visa waiver, which is not something you can renew or somebody should be working on, and you go, well, wait a second, how long has this been going? You start digging and you uncover the whole mound of it. So I think that compliance side is still a question mark for me. I don't know that the COVID's going to make it better or worse. It's just still a thing. I think that mobility is going to get more attention. I think travel budgets in general are going to get a lot more attention for the time being. I mean, everybody wants to save money on travel. We've just proven that we could go for how many months now and how many months to go with dramatic reductions in travel. What does that mean for future travel budgets? And same thing for mobility assignments. Like I said before, I don't see commuter assignments in the same way, but I also don't see a big change to mobility policy in general as a result of the pandemic, like a pandemic addendum. I got a question through our domestic program about what COVID provisions have you put in your domestic policy? Well, which ones did you want? Like, you got to give me an example. I think more important is having a mechanism to address those needs as they come up. You couldn't predict some of this stuff. Some of the stuff like school in 2 locations.
Right.
You're going to add that to the policy that, hey, if you need school in 2 locations, you can do it. Unfortunately, I think for this, so much of it just still has to be on an exceptional basis and where it makes sense.
Yeah. So, I think you touched on something there, though, Chris, that's huge, right? How much have we learned about expenditure that's unnecessary? And how much have we had to kind of tighten the purse strings over the course of the last couple of months because of the impact this has had on business? And generally, what's been the impact on business? Not to go off on too far a tangent, for us in the US, we were, I guess, fortunate we have a good infrastructure and drive-through, and that we were able to continue that part of our business and delivery and drive-through. Now, even, we get into the challenges with that itself, because now you have to have people there working. Mm-hmm. But there were countries where we completely closed down. Now, I think, we're a pretty big customer of yours, right? Not that we make up your entire revenue by any stretches of the imagination, but we've got restaurants closing down. We're not selling any Coke. Mm-hmm. And we're certainly not doing the free refills, so we're not going through it. Even when we're drive-through, it's going to be a one fill, go mm-hmm. through, no refills. So we're not going through as much Coke. But I guess thankfully for your business, you've got a lot of other outlets as well. But for us, I think, as that kind of major decline in business came in, and we kind of cut out these other expenses, there'd be real questions asked about how many of these expenses are necessary going forward. Right. Travel will be a huge one. And you're right. I think that's another aspect of it. How necessary are these international assignments? So it's just a slightly different angle of what we've already discussed. Mm-hmm. I mean, is that what you're kind of seeing as well from a business perspective?
Yes, absolutely. And before I forget, I think you guys should try a promotion where you go to drive-through free refills. I think that would be phenomenal. It will put you guys that'd be great. I think, and I know we would love that. So yeah, it's I think probably most people see the connection between our companies, but that does make the session even more fun. The dependence on each other. And yeah, we need Coca-Cola needs all of your restaurants open and appreciates all the staff coming in to do that job. I'm not on the sales side or marketing side or any of that, but I can see. Somebody asked me one time, well, hey, it's great news. Coke's flying off the shelves. Yeah, but it's not, flying out off the concession stand at the sporting events or any of these other places. So, yeah, I think some industries are obviously impacted more than others. And for us, I can't even imagine how much we're saving in business travel right now. So what's that long-term impact going to be? It's not offsetting potential losses, but I think it makes us re-examine, just like with the mobility side. Maybe we're going to look a little harder at which assignments go forward, or which trips are really and truly necessary.
Yeah, that's fair. It's kind of timely for us anyway. We're reviewing our program in its entirety at the moment anyway, so this kind of lines up quite well, because I have a feeling that if I wasn't doing it already, I'd be tasked with doing a lot of this work that I'm doing currently.
What do you think for an international, for an expat going out on a summit? We talked about some of the services might change, like the virtual surveys. That technology's been around for a while for the household goods side. That's going to be, to me, a must-have. Uh, you know, even once there's a vaccine, and I think when there's an effective vaccine is going to change this conversation a little bit. But once there's an effective vaccine, still would want more people in the house than maybe absolutely necessary. So what else is going to change? What do you
Well,
think?
I think you're right. I think this experience is going to maybe, I don't want to say force, but I think encourage the adoption of a lot of technologies that are there.
Mhm.
I've seen even within our organization people who prior to this just wouldn't dream of having certain positions be filled by a remote worker. They would
Mhm.
have insisted on, no, 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 we need that. That position needs kind of feet in the office. Completely changed their opinion on that. No, after seeing how we have functioned from an office perspective over the last 12 weeks, whatever it is, 11, 12 weeks, we're perfectly fine hiring
Right.
somebody to work from a remote location in this capacity. So I think the experience forced upon people is going to maybe change their opinions of some of these things. So you raised a good
Yeah.
example there, the surveying, household goods. People might have been a bit reluctant to do that before. Do it. They have a positive experience. Why hesitate to do it in the future? So that might have an impact on the industry in that way.
What about look and see trips? Do you think that, I mean, for me, if there was any type of a quarantine, even if it was like the self-imposed kind of 14 days when I got to a new location, I don't think I'd want to go.
But you can't do it then, can you? I mean, certainly not under our program. I think our exploratory trips are 7 days or 7 nights or something like that. So they're
Mhm.
going to have to quarantine for 14 when they get there. We're going to have to rethink that. You know, that's it is an interesting one because if there's any uncertainty or any concern about the assignment failing, you absolutely want to have that exploratory trip put in. But again, you look at it, we'll have to deal with that in other ways. So
Mhm.
there's got to be more contact with people in the office, maybe more virtual contact with the DSP, encourage a
Mhm.
lot more research about the area they're moving to, the online tours. They have
Right.
this VR concept anyway, and then you might be looking at, a little bit of flexibility in terms of the temporary housing to give people a little bit more time to get set up if they need it. What do you think
That
yourself?
that's exactly what I was thinking about. The potential for additional temp housing time in lieu of the look and see trip. So maybe it's yeah, I don't think people are gonna want to go see a ton of apartments in person. I think that's gonna get a little more complex. So those VR tours, I think, would be much more valuable. And being able to, yeah, I was having this conversation with a guy getting ready to go on an assignment just recently. Obviously, look and see trips not very exciting to him right now, and so that's the first recommendation we made is
Yeah.
maybe there'd be some additional temp housing time so that he can locate something. I think that's something we'll have to see.
We could end up leaning on our vendors a little bit more in that situation as well. I know some of the DSPs we've used when it's been and it's someone at an executive level, if they go and visit the houses or the accommodation before they bring our people there, and they
Hmm.
go and give it the thorough look. They have the trained eye. They know what to look for more than the average person. So I've had some good experiences where we've had our executives go in. They really like the property, and they stop before you make this decision. This is what I noticed 2 days ago when I was at the property. So I want you to factor it into your decision making. So again, it could be an opportunity for vendors to kind of augment that service in that way rather than
Hmm.
simply relying on the virtual tours.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think this will? How do you think this will change like the relocation management companies? How do you think this will impact them? I give you the hard question.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Yeah, I was actually just thinking to myself, do you have an answer for that? Because I'm not sure actually. I mean, listen, they're going to be under the same pressure. I mean, at this point in time, my guess is they run. I mean, I don't know, but if they run on fairly tight margins, these sorts of periods of time are really going to put stress on their business. And how can they respond to that? They need people to move, or they need people to be on assignment to have any
Mhm.
kind of work to do. So yeah, I mean, it will be interesting how mobility kind of progresses. If there's a huge declines in it, then presumably the industry has to shrink. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, they're they're gonna have to continue to innovate. I've seen some really interesting concept come out of RMCs, and very forward-thinking, forward-looking. That creating that flexibility for us. What do your expats need? So, and trying to anticipate those needs, doing things like essentially a virtual DSP or online DSP. That's going to change the cost model for everybody involved. And so, yeah, it's going to be a challenging time, I think, for all suppliers, and it's really going to depend on how quickly economies rebound. If a vaccine is announced next week, as an example, I think we'll see economies rebound a little more quickly. But if businesses decide to conservative and delay assignments or reduce the number of expats, and then that's going to trickle down to the suppliers, I think we could be at this for another couple of years. So it's really it's the virus and it's the economy at this point. Usually we have some type of impact, like with mortgage in the U.S., or we have some, the tech bubble, or give us back to 9/11, and you have the event and then the impact to the economy. We still got the event going on. The event's not even close to over, and we're all holding our breath, hoping that maybe once new cases are down to this level, the economy jumps right back up, or if a vaccine is announced or whatever. So I think there's just still so much up in the air right now.
Yeah, so many different industries impacted in so many different ways. Claire, I know we've been rambling for quite a bit. Anything that we haven't touched on that you have on your mind, or any questions you have for us?
Well, Claire, can I ask, before I end on such a down note, because that wasn't my intent, I will say before I let you say it, um, some of the initiatives I've seen vendors put in place in the last few weeks and months, with like incorporating their technology, so you can see either where your people are, what's going on in this region, or the social impacts and the immigration impacts. Just so many different approaches to solve some of our issues, that the suppliers that continue to be creative are the ones that are going to lead the industry and take the business. The ones that are anticipating the needs, or even telling me what my needs are about to be, those are the people that are going to continue to be successful. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's opportunity. It's no different than any other event we've faced. It's opportunity.
I think that's a very good point. I would just say I've really enjoyed listening to you. I felt a little bit like an eavesdropper at times, because it's just been great watching you go back and forth and sort of, as I say, kick those ideas around. And very interesting hearing about the sort of the interdependence of your two companies, and the kind of the global view, and of how the business has to keep going and move forward. One of the things I wanted to ask you both is whether you think that, I mean, you've touched on this a little bit, and I think you've been very honest in terms of talking about the possible effects on budgets, and perception of the need for travel, and trying to get those mobility moves sanctioned. Do you think that this might enhance global mobility's position within the business, or might it have the opposite effect? How do you see it coming out once we're coming out of this present crisis?
That's a great question, and just like for our suppliers, it's a great opportunity for us as well. I think at Coca-Cola, we've already gone from that transactional to more strategic role, and that happened well before I was here, and it's amazing to see, so that mobility actually does have a seat at the table. I think that the work that we've collectively done throughout this pandemic is continuing to elevate that role. And I think for organizations where mobility is still seen as transactional and not strategic, I think they absolutely have the opportunity to show that consultative side, where you've got managers saying, well, I still need this person in this country next week. And you say, but there's a travel ban and there's a quarantine. Like, and how do so it's being able to have this conversation, and now they're coming to mobility first. If you weren't already having them, now you're able to.
I mean, I would have thought you were sort of really in pole position for this crisis. You already had a lot of the information that the rest of the business probably needed, but obviously, as you say, the general sort of economics of things are going to have a big effect on perception. What about you, Brian?
Yeah, I kind of go back to Chris's comments just before you asked the question and circle back around to this industry full of a lot of very intelligent people, and now is the time to show their innovation. I think there's one comment or one view that we need to understand the environment we're working in. There's also an opportunity for people to predict that, or for people to identify the problems that exist now, and whether or not they think they're going to exist in the future. Is there an opportunity to promote something else in this space? I know it's kind of pretty vague in terms of what I'm getting at, but part of it kind of comes back to what I was saying about maybe now there's greater adoption of some technologies where people are hesitant before because they've had the experience. It's been forced upon them. Well, this experience has been forced on us. We've had it, and is there something better we can offer? I don't think it's just down to people in my position or Chris's position. As I said, this is the industry as a whole, and we have a lot of vendors doing different things, and RMCs and all the other vendors, the RMCs work with the tax consultants, so on and so forth. I think there's going to be a lot of smart people thinking things through and trying to come up with new product offerings and new things that are going to be appealing to the business. I agree with Chris's comments in terms of mobility having that strategic arm. I mean, we kind of separated our strategy from our delivery strategy a number of years ago, and it kind of does give you the time to think about things in a different way. And that'll be our challenge. And some people have large departments, other people have small departments, but the industry itself, there's enough kind of goodwill within the industry for people to come together. And two heads are better than one and all the rest of them. So it's opportunity.
Great, thank you. Well, it's a very good way of putting it. Two heads are better than one. You did a great job, both of you. Thank you so much again, and speak to you again soon.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks, Chris. Good talking to you.
Thank you. Good talking to you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much. I do think that would make a great podcast series, actually, and it would be interesting to hear from other leaders.
Time now for another 5 minutes refreshment break. When we return, our panel will be talking about dealing with the COVID-19 fallout and getting on the road to recovery. Our thanks again to our silver sponsors, International SOS and United Healthcare Global.
So, finally, to our closing panel. Societies, economies, businesses, and people have suffered a profound shock with the coronavirus pandemic. Global mobility, as we all know, is a discipline that's founded on the very idea of globalization. So, how can it adapt to this new world of closed borders, quarantines, and lockdowns? Let's talk to our panel.
Welcome to our next session. It's a panel discussion dealing with the COVID-19 fallout and getting on the road to recovery. Thanks to our silver sponsors, United Healthcare Global. Our speakers in this session include Dr. Amit Arwendecker, Werner Anderson, Charlotte Sword, Patricia Tavares, and hosted and chaired by Claire Tennant-Skull.
Okay, hello and welcome to our closing panel discussion for our 2020 Americas Summit. We are looking at policy and programs and dealing with the COVID-19 fallout, getting on the road to recovery, really. So as we all know, societies, economies, businesses, we've all suffered a profound shock with this current crisis. And global mobility is obviously founded on the whole concept of globalization. So in the context of all this, how do we move forward? How does global mobility lead the way? And what are the points at which we need to review how we do things and how we can expand on best practice? So with me today, we have a fantastic panel. I'm going to go to you alphabetically and just ask you to introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about your company and the nature of your program, what your company does. So I'll go first to Werner Anderson, who is Director of Global Mobility at BD.
I'm Berna Anderson. I'm the Director for Global Mobility at Becton Dickinson, or BD. I lead our worldwide global mobility programs. We are a medical device company headquartered out of New Jersey in the United States. And our program is a mid-sized program with a mixture of international assignments, one-way transfers, and everything that you can think of. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I'll go to Dr. Amit Arwendecker, who's the North American Medical Director at United Healthcare Global. Welcome, Dr. Amit.
Thanks for having me. So my name is Dr. Amit Arwendecker. I'm the Medical Director for United Healthcare Global Solutions. We're a healthcare provider, insurance provider, and a medical assistance company based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we help our clients around the world with their global mobility needs, their medical needs, evacuations and security, and happy to be here. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and now to Charlotte Sword, who's joining us from London, actually. She's a Senior Partner and Global Head of HR at Foster & Partners.
Oh, hi. Thanks very much for inviting me. So for those of you that don't know, Foster & Partners, we are a global architectural practice building iconic buildings around the world and infrastructure projects.
Okay, thank you. And Patricia Tavares, of course, joining us from Sao Paulo in Brazil. She's Global Mobility Lead in the Americas for Unilever.
Hi, Claire. Thank you a lot for the invite. So Unilever, I suppose most of the people know, is a consumer goods products company. We are global. We are basically in 98% of the households of everybody. So if you don't know, just turn your product around and see if there's a big blue U there, and then there we are. Our program is mid to big size, I would say. We are working today with home and host-based policies. We have the different type of policies also, and lots to add here on how we had to change to adapt to COVID.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Actually, Patricia, I'm going to start with you, if I may, because obviously your responsibility for Unilever ranges right across the Americas, North America, through LATAM and even the Caribbean. You're juggling all sorts of issues associated with your mobility policies and in so many different jurisdictions. How are you able to make sure that you treat all your employees, equally, but in obviously in a way that's appropriate to their particular circumstances?
So one of the things, Claire, that we mostly focus here in Unilever is, alongside with the importance of the assignment, obviously, is duty of care, right? So we have to make sure that the assignee is comfortable. We have to make sure that the family is also aligned and wants to go on the assignment. We take care of all that personal side of the assignment first, and then we go into immigration and into taxes and all the compliance issues to make sure that everybody, independent of the region that you are in, be it North America, Latin America, or the Caribbean, you are comfortable to be there, you want to be there, your family wants to be there, and we as Unilever guarantee that we are also 100% compliant with everything that has to be followed.
Okay, thank you. Bernard, BD, you make medical instruments, obviously, as we've heard. Your company has had to keep going during the peak of the crisis. But how did it change the way that your assignees and employees worked? And do you think this will prompt a sort of redesign in general of your policies and programs?
Yes, as you just pointed out, we had to continue manufacturing. We had to continue delivering products to our clients, the hospitals, be it our swab test or any of the other medical devices that are being used during this pandemic. And we needed to continue delivering the talent where it needed to be. We obviously had a lot of arrangements where individuals had to work remotely or are currently still working remotely. And we had to really prove our agility in our processes to make this happen and ensure that we are fully aligned with our colleagues in corporate tax and legal to ensure compliance at the same time. In terms of policies, we have definitely discovered some areas that could be, we're already running a Core Flex program, so we thought we are pretty flexible, but we realized that we need to not only have flexibility in benefits, but also in process. So there will be some changes there. And there will be also some plans in terms of having some guidelines around remote and virtual working.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Charlotte, I'll come to you as well, if I may. Obviously, as you mentioned, you're responsible for some huge projects around the world and several going on in the States, I think, and Latin America at the moment. Perhaps you can give us some examples of those and tell us a bit more about your sort of overall population. I think you have a very international workforce. Am I right? And also, so presumably immigration, tax, payroll issues, they've very much been at the forefront of your mind recently.
Yeah, it has. So the proposition within Foster and Partners is we tend to do a lot of our design work in London, but over 85% of our projects are overseas. So that's in every continent of the world, apart from Antarctica. So there are some very large projects going on at the current time, both in North America, Latin America, Middle East, China, Asia, and Europe. So basically, the population within the London office are 1/3 British, 1/3 European, 1/3 rest of world. So it's very, very international practice and designed specifically to service our client base. So yes, what we tend to do is do the design in London. And then when the projects go live and we break ground and and they're on site, then the architects or the designers that have been involved in that process tend to go to that site in order to service those projects, typically on assignments from anywhere between 2 to 5 years.
Right. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. And then, Dr. Ami, can you give us a sort of overview of what you're seeing with your clients, what they're doing as they take their first tentative steps back to this normality?
A lot of our partners are starting to head back into opening up work as the pandemic's first wave is really winding down. And what we're noticing in some of our more successful partners is that they're really keeping their focus on their employees. They're keeping the focus on the health and safety of their employees, focusing on their duty of care, and maintaining a flexibility. The pandemic has forced everyone to change the way they work. We've had to be more flexible with hours, putting positions which were previously not deemed to be telework into telework. And we've had to fundamentally change the nature of how we work. As we're going into the next phase, hopefully returning into offices and co-located workspaces, the most successful companies are trying to keep as many of those elements as they can as they bring the teams back together. And I think that's very important because one of the things that we may see is additional shutdowns in the future as this virus pops back up again, hopefully in localized outbreaks as opposed to a generalized outbreak. We've seen that in several places that have opened up in Southeast Asia where they had to close down small sectors of a jurisdiction. So maintaining that flexibility and putting the safety of their working force at the forefront is going to allow most companies to open up and then stay open and be productive.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I want to go to all of you with this question, really. Obviously, automation's been a tremendous help to mobility in general. It can take some of the more repetitive tasks, and for assignees too. And I think a lot of assignees have been very happy with the kind of self-service approach and so on. But I think what you touched on earlier, Berna, it's about actually perhaps there's the need for a bit more hand-holding at this point. It's a sort of more of a stronger touch from you all with your assignees. Can you tell me a bit about how you've coped with that?
Yeah, we definitely had a high touch approach and reached out to all our active assignees, but we also have a lot of one-way transfers. So we reached out to everyone who transferred within the past 12 months. And what really this pandemic has shown is that automation is good and helpful, as you said, for the tactical steps. However, reaching out, having conversations, but also having strong relationships with your suppliers has really been tested and proven itself during this pandemic. And going forward, this really helps us to prioritize what's really important to us to ensure that we have the right associate experience in place or employee experience in place. And as Dr. Amit said, health and safety has really gone into the forefront and has become really important. So we really have learned what questions to ask and how to prepare for something like that.
Yes, sure. Patricia, if I could come to you next, actually, because I know from talking to you on our webinar recently too, I know that Unilever, you've been doing a tremendous amount of work there, particularly in Latin America, because sadly you've been very badly hit by this virus, to reassure your assignees and so on. But it's sort of in practical terms, what have you been doing and how do you think this will inform your policies?
So what we did here first, right at the beginning of the crisis, even before it hit Latin America, we contacted every single assignee that was at post, and we contacted also our what we call the permanent transfers, which are the one-way transfers, right? Even if they are now local employees in the other countries, they still are previous assignees. So we wanted to make sure, and they are in a strange country, right? So we wanted to make sure that everybody was okay. Who wanted go home, who asked to go home, we helped them get home. Who wanted to stay in the host country stayed in the host country. And we did have very few, but we did have some cases that actually asked to go to a third country, which would be, for example, the third country of the nationality of the spouse, right? Yeah. So let's go to the spouse's country instead of going to my home country. What we weighed a lot at this moment was an analysis of the roles. Can these roles be done virtually, or do these roles need to be in place? So our factories, for example, didn't close. They all continued working with the same shifts 24/7. What we did was, and this was not only for assignees, but for everybody, we first analyzed the risk groups. Those people were put at home. Then we analyzed who was going to be able to go into the factories, and how it would be better, right? So, and then we also increased our medical staff in the factories. So if necessary, we would have somebody there, a nurse or a technician or somebody that could help if there was any emergency there. I can say that what we saw from the team from the factories was a greater engagement and how proud they felt to be there at this moment, so difficult and so hard for everybody, and also to know that in some factories, for example, we changed a little bit the product that we're processing. So instead of just being a soap, it was an antibacterial soap.
Yes.
In some factories, we managed to produce alcohol gel. So yes. This increased their engagement. that in relation to them, right? In relation to us, Global Mobility, we have been working like crazy to make sure that everybody is fine, to make sure that we are aligned, for example, with our global security teams, with our health and safety teams, also to know if what we're doing is the best practice that has to be in place. For those that wanted to travel, we had to align with our travel desk to make sure that all travel and flights, diplomatic or commercial or whatever they are, were aligned with them. So a lot of backstage that we had to do that normally we wouldn't do. In relation to our policies, we do see a little bit of changes in relation to maybe an increase of what everybody is now calling virtual assignments, right? It's hot topic all over the world. What are we going to adapt to the virtual assignments? We're analyzing costs, we're analyzing compliance, we're analyzing all the other issues that have to come to see if we are going to move towards virtual assignments or not. No definition. A great trend that I see on more executive levels on longer term assignments and more development assignments for the younger people. And those might be the virtual assignments or the short-term assignment.
Yeah, okay. All right. Charlotte, if you could comment on that too, please.
Well, I mean, when we saw this pandemic starting, it obviously started in China, and we have 4 offices in China. So we could sort of see, and it gave us the opportunity to see what was happening with our assignees that were in Hong Kong and China itself. And so some of the things that we saw from there was the raising of the anxiousness level. And for us, because we have a small population in a variety of different countries around the world, it's quite complicated to obviously get replacements assignees out would have been very difficult for us. So we needed to try and find solutions of how to make them feel a little bit more secure within those environments. So we came up with lots of different initiatives similar to what you've heard from colleagues on the panel. One of the things that we did introduce very, very quickly for all of our people, including our local staff, was the virtual GP service. We found that a lot of people really wanted to connect with medical advice and get that advice very, very quickly, because they just needed information and they wanted to talk to a medical practitioner. So the introduction of that telemedical service was really, really important for us, and that was something that was a bit of a game changer, and that stemmed a lot of the requests for wanting to return. The other things that we tended to do was look at and reach out and engage to every country, and ensure that we understood how people were feeling, and provide a variety of different services, whether it's through counselling, EAP services, views around how we could analyse if virtual working could work, if they could work from home and from which jurisdiction, and try and help them and take care of those hygiene factors, so the compliance issues, the tax issues, etc., etc. So we listened to each individual in terms of their own individual circumstances, definitely had requests for third countries, etc., with all of the challenges that came with. So we needed to come up with some solutions for that. But quite a lot of the automation we found in communication definitely increased, engagement definitely increased, and the team had to become a lot more creative on the solutions that we supplied. So, for example, some small things around parents working at home and virtually in a strange country, and it was, how am I possibly carrying on with my design work or going to site and I have the family at home? So we came up with a Learning for Children initiative, which we could use some of our architectural or drawing staff to either talk about maths problems or how to draw or art or design or whatever it might be. So and our landscape architects talking about horticulture and how to grow a mini vegetable garden.
Yeah.
So there was some fun things to do, which definitely helped engage the population. So I would say there are positives that have come out of this pandemic for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, well, thank you very much. Can I just, Dr. Ami, I want to come to you from the medical perspective in a second, but just going back to that, Charlotte, you said that your employees had really taken up the sort of virtual GP services. Was it something that they asked you for, or was that already in place and you just had to promote it more strongly, or how did it work?
No, it was something we were thinking about, but we primarily were thinking about it for the London staff, because if you work in London, you just can't get to see your doctor ever. It was very difficult. So we were exploring that. But when this happened in China, it expedited that process. So what we did do is we reached out to our insurers to see what services they were doing, and we sped that process up. So actually, in terms of offering it within the United States all the way through the rest of the world, it was something that happened very, very quickly.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you. And Dr. Amit, obviously that the sort of the physical crisis of this, the threat to physical health has very much brought this to the fore, and telemedicine to the fore. But what about looking after mental health too? That's obviously another issue that's extremely important.
Yeah, and I think to just piggyback on what Charlotte said, the this crisis has really brought telemedicine up to the forefront. It's been sort of developing for the last 10 years, but this has really been a moment where we've seen those services expand. We've seen our member base and our employees really take to telemedicine in a way that we didn't think was going to happen. And the future of healthcare really does lie in being able to provide healthcare to people when they need it, where they need it. And so telemedicine is going to play a huge role in that. The other thing you mentioned, yeah, physical health has been affected greatly, but a lot of the measures that we've had to undertake over the last 6 to 8 months to protect ourselves, our families, and everyone's well-being have really impacted the mental health of everyone around us. We've seen social distancing. We've seen sort of a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. A lot of people get moving when they were not expecting to, and then trying to figure out, what do you do with your children? What do you do with your loved ones? And it's for a lot of people, there's been a perpetual degree of anxiety and uncertainty. Use of EAP lines across the country with us has gone up significantly, and we're happy to provide that service. I think it's very important to make that available to people to help them cope in this situation. And in most crises, the way that we manage is we come together as communities, as people, as workplaces. We come together, we mourn together, we celebrate together. Unfortunately, what's happened in this situation is we've had to stop doing that. And so one of the key sort of defense mechanisms we have has been undermined or taken away from us. So we're seeing a lot of people struggling with that. But at the same time, I'm really very impressed by how people have been creative. They found other ways to connect with others. We've seen Zoom and like all these other services where you can telework being used for socialization, being used to help people cope, reconnect with family, with loved ones. And I think that's really a bright side here, and something that I don't see going away, regardless of what happens in the near future. I think that's a wonderful thing for us to focus on and to take heart in.
Yes, I think that's key. What you've said, and actually you've all kind of touched on this point: engagement and making people feel valued and supported, but also that they are fulfilling a really important role. I mean, particularly for you, Patricia, as you said, manufacturing hand sanitizer and so on. For you, Berna, medical instruments, you had to keep things going. And I think, Charlotte's example of engaging the children of people who are relocated is absolutely fantastic. In terms of, your vendor landscape, one of the things during this summit, I was talking to, we were listening to Christopher Chalk and Brian Medine from Coca-Cola and McDonald's, respectively. And they were saying what a fabulous job so many of their vendors have done and how they've been keeping them going. How do you think this whole crisis is going to affect perhaps your relationship with them? And what do you think vendors need to be looking to do to survive? Because let's face it, there is going to be an economic downturn following this too.
I think that the relationship that we have with the vendor normally had to be close already, but now we are having to be closer to them. they're having to reinvent their services, right? So, for example, how do you do if you have to hand in an apartment in New York
Yeah.
and you can't because the building won't let the team in, right? Not even for packing or even for the departure services or anything like that. So they're having to reinvent themselves. We're having to support them. And if we don't walk hand in hand, we're not going to be able to deliver the services that we have to deliver now during this period. And I also see that as we are getting closer to them and working in a greater partnership, that's going to be something that's going to lead to us to more success in our future relationships because we're going to know each other better. We're going to understand each other better. And we are going to continue walking hand in hand to make sure that we develop and deliver all the services that we have to deliver with more success than what we used to do before.
I guess there's a deeper level of trust that's been fostered during this.
Yeah, and the kind of requests, for example, I don't know if this is the forum or not, right? But I did have an assignee that passed away in New York, not from COVID, from another problem. And I had to ask my vendor, which has never done this, to find a funeral home. And it's not part of their services, right? And they were absolutely fantastic in finding a place. So these kind of different requests that are coming out now, which I think is enriching our partnership even each day more.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry for my hand, I'm Italian. That's why.
Okay, Berna and Charlotte, do you want to comment on that?
I can only agree with Patricia on this, right? You really had to rely on your vendors, or we are relying very much on our vendors, and everything has become custom. Everything has become complex and challenging. Everything is one off, and you have to work very, very closely together. And as Charlotte said earlier, there is something good that came out of it, and I can only underline that by within the organization, within BD, we have seen such strong relationships being built that were new relationships. People are going on social happy hours via video calling, right? My team that's actually working mostly remotely, we would be on phone calls all day, but now we're video calling and people have seen each other for the first time, which they never, we could have used the technology before, but we didn't. And it's the same with the vendors. Coming back to the vendors, we had to learn what questions to ask about, are you sanitizing the trucks, and how is virtual home finding looking like? But our vendors also really stepped up to the plate and really wanted to find out, what can we do to make you and your employees comfortable, and started thinking for our employees and came up with custom solutions. I had someone that I repatriated from China to the US through New York City, which was not an easy thing to do, given that, we couldn't get packing in, all kinds of things, quarantine. How do you get from New York to Maryland where the person was living, right? All not very easy. But they really helped us to, and they're currently doing the same thing. I think the vendors are realizing they have to provide custom solutions, and really we have to have strong partnerships to excel in the future.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely agree with all of that. I think you need a trusted partner that you're working with. And I think actually this crisis has probably deepened those relationships. And in terms of when you're doing the video conferencing, and even when you're talking to your vendors, you're seeing them now as humans. They're not just suppliers. You're seeing where they live sometimes in their home environments and things like that. So the human element, I think, on a lot of these business relationships has actually come back to the fore. And that helps sort of strengthen maybe some of the creativity, because it's not just about delivering a service anymore. It's that extra mile, because those are the things that people are really appreciating at the moment.
We do a lot of sort of repatriations. We've had to bring some people home through difficult situations over the last few months or so. And sort of tapping on what everyone else said, we've really found which vendors were really committed to helping us, being creative, creating custom solutions when new barriers were put into place, and which ones weren't up to the task. And so for those organizations that have helped us, we really have deepened that relationship with them so that we know who we can count on when things get rough. And it's been, I think it's really been an eye opener for a lot of people in our organization. But I think it also gives us some more confidence when the world opens back up again. We know that we've been through the tough times with these vendors. We know that we can count on them, that they're committed to us, and that they know that we're committed to them. So we definitely see those relationships growing and becoming more fruitful in the future.
Okay, thank you. All right, so if we're moving on to people actually going back into offices, and I emphasize this is all quite tentative at the moment, and obviously it's happening in certain parts of the world and not others, and even perhaps within the US in certain states and not others. But Charlotte, I believe you recently surveyed your workforce to gauge how ready they were to return. Can you tell us what that revealed to you and how you're starting this process?
It was really interesting for us because we don't normally survey as part. There's normally quite a lot of, it's very creative, so lots of people voice their opinions quite vociferously. So, but this was a way for us to do a really quick temperature gauge. So we had a 90% response rate. So that showed us that people were absolutely passionate about it. And I think that some of the things that we definitely saw was that the appetite to return to some sort of semblance of an office environment for the collaboration process, we thought naturally was going to be pretty high. It was for partners and for associate partners, but actually for the staff themselves, it was polar opposite. It was kind of quite interesting. So it was really good to play that back to the board. In terms of that, what it did tell us is that people had some craving to come back to the office, to speak to their friends, to maybe understand a little bit more about the projects, but they weren't seeing that as a Monday to Friday thing, that had changed, that they were really seeing it as something of coming in for 2 to 3 days a week and the production stuff being done somewhere else remotely. And I think for the business, we always resisted, I want to say this, in terms of that, because we thought, the quality of our design was about everybody in it together and everyone together. But what this process has shown us is that we can use the technology effectively, and we've continued to be able to innovate and design using technology and still win competitions. So that's been
You've won
really
new work.
interesting.
Sorry.
Yeah, we're winning. Yeah, we've been winning. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mm. Yeah, so that has been a real learning curve for us. So, and obviously taking that temperature gauge and then taking into account some of their views around the worries about public transport or versus being able to cycle or work and what they need that will make them feel comfortable has been really helpful for us to open up some of our offices on a tentative basis. So the London office is open for a small proportion of people, and our China and Asia offices are open.
What sort of practical measures are you having to put in place? I mean, presumably a different sort of design. Again, you're in the business of design. I guess it's an opportunity to redesign your offices almost.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're doing things like one-way systems around the campus, things like using non-contact door openings, traffic light systems for things like the toilets, for example, obviously the issuing of PPE. So Foster's did some work with the NHS for things like visors, etc., as part of our initiative. We wanted to sort of help. So we now have supplies of those kinds of things that are available, but making sure that PPE and that our processes and our risk assessments were done and communicated out to our people was part of making them feel comfortable. But we do a rota system, and people can't just turn up at our offices. That has to be signed off. So there is a process so that we can maintain those social distancing and make sure that people do feel comfortable. And obviously there's just a ton of sanitizer everywhere.
Yes. Keeping Patricia busy, that's for sure. But actually, Patricia, it's a serious point. You have been busy all through this, and you've had to keep both your offices, I think, some of your offices and your factories going. Again, what are those practical measures that you've put in place that could be useful for other people to put in practice?
So we basically today we have the China office opened already. We have a few countries like Australia, New Zealand that are asking permission to our committee, our incident management committee, to reopen their offices. And obviously, workplace has been working really, really hard. So, for example, we don't have traffic lights, but we have lanes where you go and the other lane you come back. We have the elevators are now separated for the buildings that have elevators. So according to the side, they have the lines inside that you can put one person on each side, facing back to each other. We have masks available for every employee. We have tons of alcohol already, sanitizers also spread out. The long desks in the admin offices where we used to sit 4 on each side, now you're going to sit 2 on one side and 1 in the middle of the other side. There's also another role analysis that's being done of who actually has to get back into the office and who can continue working from home for more time. So, for example, who works with food solutions, right? They need the industrial kitchen to be able to test the products and everything. So those are probably going to be one of the first ones to go back into our offices. At the same time, HR has proven that we can work 100% from home. So we're most likely going to be the last team into the office. All these kind of precautions are being taken care of. And we also have, for during this period, a few things that were done for the employees in general. So mindfulness sessions for those that are needing help. You have one in the morning, one in the afternoon. We have several sessions that are decompressing sessions that we call them. So for example, if you want to learn how to set a table for a fantastic dinner that you want to do, we have a session every 2 weeks where you can learn how to set a dinner, how to set a table.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, different things that are coming up like that and that are coming upon request, right? So what is different in your business that you can offer to all the employees, right? This setting table was actually great. I participated and I loved it and wrote down lots of things. So these kind of things that we're trying to do to decompress the employees as much as we can, offer them this. And then the last thing that we did, for example, in São Paulo, which is in a terrible situation at this moment, is in the peak of the crisis, we actually allowed the employees that work in São Paulo to go into the office and pick up their chairs, their ergonomic kit, which has a support for your feet, a support for your laptop, and everything that you can do to make the person feel more comfortable working at home. Obviously, you have to set a time that you're going to go pick it up. You have to say what you want. You have to go in your own car, park in the garage. There will be somebody there to hand you in the sanitized set so that you put you in your car. So all these kind of cares that we're taking with the employees, I think are part of the process that we're going through this.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I mean, that's a really good point. Bernard, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think not much to add. Very similar to what Patricia explained. We have a lot of manufacturing sites, obviously, as well. They had to continue working. On some manufacturing sites, we had increased production, or we have increased production because we had to deliver more products to the market, or the swab test and things like that. Locally, this is all handled locally. Every manufacturing site has their protocols to ensure the health and safety of our employees. The same with the offices. We're going through a phased approach to go back to the offices. Obviously, we have a population that's office-based, or can work from home, like HR support functions, but we also have a lot of employees that work in labs, and it's been prioritized who has to go back first and how that will look like. There is a global work stream, and obviously they all link into local experts who are helping through that, very similar to what Patricia explained.
Yeah. Do you think that this is going to have a detrimental effect on mobility as a whole, and business travel? How is that going to work in the future?
I could start.
$1 million question. $1 million question.
I would risk saying. Yeah, I would risk saying at this moment, business travelers are totally out of the game, because you have to quarantine when you go, and probably when you come back. So if at this moment, I would say it's basically impossible to work with that, right? which is bringing upon us then the virtual needs, right? So we are working with the virtual needs, with the how can you do this without being in the country physically? Like, for example, I have a team that sits in New Jersey, and I was there in February, and I don't think I'll be going back this year, right? So how are we going to deal with this without being there, just virtual? And I was just using myself as an example, but I think this is what we're going to have to apply to all the assignments and to all the businesses that come to us, right? So I think it's a matter of following a little bit the flow also, right? The country combination. Are you allowed to travel into this country? Are you allowed to leave this country? Or is your country totally closed? Or like China is now open, you can actually go into China, or Australia and New Zealand that are asking to be open. So I think it depends a lot on the countries also that we're talking about.
Sure.
And I think it also, I agree, but I do think you still have to deliver the talent. Yes, there are certain roles that can be done virtual and remote. And as I said earlier, I think it's going to be really important that companies have some virtual remote working guidelines in place, or work from home. It's more than work from home, right? Because from a mobility perspective, we need to look at the compliance and things like that, but it also links into everything that's HR related, right? Do people get a stipend when they work from home? What tools do they use? How can you make it permanent? Things like that. But if you think at sales functions, for example, right, will they be reinvented, or will they continue traveling? I have heard from vendors that on a US domestic level, they are starting to plan travel because they want to get in front of the clients, and they're meeting off-site with clients, not at their offices, because they're working from home. So I think it's going to be a mixed bag, and we will still need to relocate individuals. I don't think there's people out there who are like, oh my God, we're not going to move people anymore. I don't think that's going to change. If I look at the numbers, I just ran our numbers. We really didn't have a dip, not significant in numbers. Yeah, I just ran them yesterday for the first quarter of the year, the first calendar, or through the end of May, actually. Sorry, not the first quarter. And you still need to align with the growth of the organization and the talent needs that are out there, but there will be more complex situations with remote working, virtual working, split families, because we will see probably more and more individuals where the family might not be comfortable moving, and we need to work around those things. So I think it's going to be a mixed bag. It also, obviously, we don't have a crystal ball. Depends on what's going to happen with the pandemic and how the economy will rebound. When and if and how.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, actually, you brought. Sorry, Charlotte, go ahead.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, I just had a conversation today about potential assignment actually in the Middle East, which we think is going to go ahead in the next couple of weeks. So I think it is going to be definitely a mixed bag. Definitely. And we are seeing that some of our partners are reaching out and do need to explore those business development opportunities. So we're looking at different ways of doing it. We're using the virtual methods, obviously, but also using the talent that's in country. And we're trying to work around some of maybe the quarantine rules and sort of use our talent maybe more intelligently than we did before, in terms of a virtual and someone there on a physical basis. I think that as things do start to, and travel does start to open up, question mark whether it's as much as it was before, but I definitely think there will be a desire for sales and business development to continue to meet face to face, especially with people. I mean, I think it's easier if you have an ongoing relationship to do things in the virtual environment. It's just much more difficult to create new business opportunities using the virtual environment.
But I mean, we've
just to complement, sorry, Claire, you also have the natural restructuring that the companies always go through, right? So there always is some part of the company that's restructuring, and you have to follow. And normally these restructurings ask for higher levels, right? So you need just to export the talent. So I honestly I think there's going to be a different way of approaching, like Berna said, more split families and this kind of approach, but I don't think it will stop. And I actually had an increase in number during. I haven't sent anybody on assignment, but we're ready. They're just waiting for immigration offices to open to start sending the people as soon as we get the new visas.
Right. Well, I think it sounds a positive sign. Dr. Ami, I want to talk about recruitment just briefly in a second, but would you like to comment on this last point?
Yeah, a lot of our partners have been reaching out to us lately asking about both the when can we reopen our offices, but also when can we start traveling again. And I think there is a lot of pent-up demand and desire to resume business travel. As everyone has said, what I'm seeing in the last about week or so is a lot of those companies that were coming up originally saying, hey, we want to find out how to do this, are now tempering their planning to say, we want to do this, but instead of starting next quarter, we're thinking about pushing this off for a longer time frame. But I don't see any of them saying we're not going to do this. It's all a matter of when can we get back to doing this. And there's sort of different degrees of how aggressive people are being about wanting to get back in front of their clients. I agree with what's been said here is for a lot of our business folks, winning new business is about winning those relationships, and we can maintain them over virtual platforms. But I think for a lot of those business relationships, people want to be face-to-face to make them work.
Okay, thank you. Well, you've all pretty much shot down my next question in a sense, because I was going to ask you about recruitment, how you think this will affect recruitment. I mean, it seemed to me that if there were fewer opportunities for people to travel within their jobs to get that international experience, maybe fewer assignments, perhaps fewer developmental assignments. I guess I wondered if that would affect your sort of your talent chain, your talent pool, as it were. But it sounds slightly different. I wonder whether the bar will be set a little higher in terms of who will go on assignment and how long for. Obviously, you can tell me more about that. But the other thing about this was that I wondered whether this was a good point at which you're reviewing your policies, your programs. Perhaps it's a point at which to kind of reassess the talent pool in general. Are there jobs that previously would have had to be done in the office but could be done at home, which would then open them out to people, maybe less able-bodied people who don't have, that way they don't have to travel to the office and so on. Are there sort of opportunities here, do you think?
I definitely think so. I mean, we've been looking at a lot of our agile and our, remote working, our working from home policies and what that then looks like. But also diversity and inclusion has been a huge topic within the practice for the last 24 months specifically. There's been a huge focus on it through whether it be the social mobility programs using apprenticeships, working with the Stephen Lawrence Trust in terms of the BAM population, or Stonewall in terms of our LGBT plus population. And we're seeing a huge push mainly from our employees in terms of, and then going with them with those particular initiatives. And we've seen over the last few years a real catalyst happen in that arena. And we're seeing that diversity of talent come through. And that's really helping us win work and retain that work, because we're seeing a pressure from our clients. They want to see a diversity of talent. They don't want a bunch of middle-aged white men turning up to sell them a building or to sell them a design. They want to see people that really represent them and what they want from their building or their house or whatever that might be. So I think this is a huge opportunity to continue that journey, especially if we can attract a more diverse population using the more remote working or the virtual systems that we've now got in place. So we're not quite so wedded to an office 9-to-5 regime.
Yes, sure. Patricia, do you want to comment on that? I know it's always been forefront of the agenda at Unilever.
Yeah, so diversity is one of the flags that we fly. It's very, very important for us, and it's definitely always considered in talent. So independent of it being a role for an assignment or just a local role, diversity is always included in all of its versions, right? So it can be somebody that is disabled, it can be somebody that has a gender, or it can be ethnicity. It's always considered. It's always within. We don't even work without considering diversity. Let's put it that way. When we're talking recruitment, it's definitely always there, part of us.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, at BD, we are proud to be diverse and inclusive, and it's always been a topic and on the forefront of our minds, whether it is local recruiting or everyday life at BD or global mobility.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Amit, I'd like to just ask you finally, could it be that this crisis, or the way that companies have handled this crisis, could act as almost as a kind of differentiator for them? So, the amount of support that they've given people, and the processes that they've got in place for the future. What do you think?
I really expect as we go forward, and recruiting and hiring comes up, that this is one of the questions I'm expecting potential employees to ask is, how did you manage this crisis? What was your approach? And what have you done now to protect and care for your employees? We've seen a wide gamut of approaches, and this is one of those areas where I think companies will have a real opportunity to differentiate themselves in the talent market. But I think this is something that our future employees are going to look for as a tangible sign for how do our corporations care for our employees and our partners and our members. So I fully expect this to be to play prominently in the talent market.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Just as a sort of a final point, it seems to me that there are quite a few things that have come out of this that you've touched on today that are really very positive. We have quite a lot to look forward to, despite some of the difficulties, and we have had huge difficulties in the past few months. It has been very hard for people, and I'm not trivializing it or minimizing it. It is going to carry on being difficult for many people. But what are the sort of the key things that you feel you're going to take forward from here?
I think at Foster's we'll probably be able to take forward that more agile, creative approach to how we deliver our work in the future.
Okay. But
I think that for us, one of the main things that I think Berna mentioned is video calling, right? And not just a normal call. Why am I mentioning that? I know it sounds small, but I think it created and developed a different kind of relationship that you have with your stakeholders, with your vendors, with your teams, with your peers, with everybody. And I firmly believe that communication is 100% of success of anything that you do. So I think that communication and actually seeing the people is making a difference. It's actually become sort of like a norm within Unilever. You have to have your video on. So I think that's one of the things that we are going to take on from here. And I always like to say that everything has a positive side to it. So I think the depth of relationships that we have created because of this isolation that we are going through is something that we're going to take for life and learn how to work in a different environment, in a different way, in a more human way, I think. And then we always say human touch is so important with the assignees, and we're learning that it's important not only with them, but with us also. So I think being more human during this period and then taking this humanity ahead.
Excellent point. Thank you. Berna, would you like to conclude?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Patricia said. I think the relationships that we've built through video calling have been very different. Everyone has seen me without makeup and my hair up in a bun, so there's nothing to hide anymore. But besides that, I think we have redefined employee experience for us. So we always spoke about how employee experience is so important in our mobility program, but this really has tested us and shown us what it means, what is employee experience, and what do we really need to deliver to our employees, not only through this pandemic, but also in the future. So definitely something that we have learned a lot about.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you so much again, panel. It was really great. And I hope you all take care. Thanks very much again.
To round up day 2. closing remarks and key takeaways with Claire Tennant-Skull. Thank you to our sponsors International SOS and United Healthcare Global.
So we've come to the end of our inaugural online summit. I hope you found it useful and interesting. I think we've all heard a great deal to make us feel very positive about the future, actually, and I think it's very encouraging. Of course, we all miss being able to meet up at the moment, but I hope that this in some way has helped you to feel more connected. Do please send us your comments, and as ever, we would be very grateful if you would fill in the quick survey that we'll send out following this summit. Your feedback is really essential to us. I just want to thank all our marvellous speakers again, and our sponsors, International SOS and United Healthcare Global, who've been great to work with, I have to say. Thank you too for joining us and for sending in your questions. I hope you listen in to our bonus podcast to hear our panelists and masterclass presenters follow up on your questions. We're very excited to announce that, all being well, we will see everyone in person next year in New York, when we will hold our Americas Summit 2021 and our Emma's celebration at the iconic TWA Hotel, a marvel of 1960s architecture, which has recently been restored to all its glory. I think we'll have a great deal to celebrate together, so it seems fitting to be holding it at a building that's really the symbol of travel and progress. We're really impatient to see you all, so we've actually moved the date a little earlier in the year, and we'll be there April 28th and 29th. Thank you so much again, and in the meantime, stay safe.